important in this region. We're a little bit ahead of a lot of metropolitan areas because we have a pretty good shared vision already.
Okay.
It was how do we get it done? What's the strategies that are in the plan? What are the policy directions? And that's really what we wanted to talk to the public and others about is, okay, here's what you said you wanted. How do we make that happen?
So what's in the plan for residents, the business community, and local governments officials? Why should they really care?
Well, I think it goes back to those two things that we drove at of economic prosperity and strong communities. It's about jobs. It's about tomorrow's jobs. It's about preparing ourselves for tomorrow's jobs. It's about places where we want to bring up our children. It's about having the kind of communities where we draw talent into, not just homegrown, which we need to do a better job of, but how do we attract talent? How do we make metropolitan Chicago and northeastern Illinois a place where smart young people want to come and live and stay and raise families? Okay. So I think it's from a personal standpoint, it's about that economic piece of making sure that we have the ability to get good jobs, to maintain good jobs, but it's also about the kind of places that we want to live and we want to raise families. On the business side, we have, there are going to be, I don't know, I'm guessing 15, 20 major, global regions in the world, maybe not that many.
Okay.
And the question is Chicago going to be one of them?
It's going to be, okay.
And if we are, then we have to do things more efficiently. We have to think about that future. We've got to think about where we fit in a global economy. And so for business, I think one of the best things that I heard was this plan provides some certainty on where we're headed. That it isn't just, we're not just all going different directions. There's a plan out there that we can all buy into, we can all start to move forward. So I think that's the important thing for the business community. For our elected officials, it's about how we work together. It's about how we coordinate our efforts. It's about how we think more regionally. It's about how we give mayors and aldermen and county board members the opportunity to do what's best for their community inside the context of regional success.
Okay. So you really feel that there's vertical alignment, if you will, in terms of pointing energies in a direction, but also giving people some, still autonomy in terms of doing what's best for their stakeholders as much as possible.
Absolutely. We have 284 municipalities in this region, more than anywhere in the country. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, later in the efficient governance. But the truth is, we have 284 municipalities because that's what people wanted. They like what they have, and they like their hometowns, and they like where they live for the most part. And so how do we let them have that specialness, that diverse kind of communities that we want in this region while still thinking about working together? That's really the goal on the elected official side.
So how can this plan be implemented broadly, considering that, each community is unique? What's your thoughts on that, how that's going to be done? That seems like a large task for the CMAP organization as well as the local leaders to sort of balance that, the interests of their individual stakeholders within their communities and what's best for the overall region.
One of the nice things that happened the day after the plan was announced and adopted was the Department of Housing and Urban Development gave us a little over $4 million grant to start to implement the plan.
Okay.
And what we're doing is putting people on the ground working with local communities about how do their issues right now fit into what we're trying to say in the plan? How do we move that ball along at the local level?
Good, okay.
And these aren't going to be people that are sitting in our offices in Chicago. They're going to be embedded in the communities, talking to them about what they need and helping them think through their issues. Whether it's they don't have an updated comprehensive plan, and you'd be surprised how many of our communities don't.
Right, because it costs money to do that. It costs money. Their resources, this stuff is not...
It's not free.
In terms of doing these plans.
And so we want to help them do that.
Okay.
As disturbing in some cases as those communities that have comprehensive plans, but their ordinances don't match where they're trying to go. And so they might say they want transit-oriented development, for example, or more development around their train station, and yet their ordinances don't match that. They don't allow it. And so we're going to try to help them with that, help them with housing plans. All of the issues that we're facing, we're trying to put some resources on the ground in communities to make that happen. We think that's the best way to do it.
So they maintain the unique richness of their towns, but at the same time sort of become more strategic in how they are executing
Right.
their own individual uniqueness.
Right, and we do think that uniqueness is important. But again, it's inside of this larger picture of how we work together and what the impacts of their decisions are on their neighbors.
Right.
Because they do have impacts. So how do we think about that together is really where we're trying to go.
Okay. Will let's talk a little bit about the role of the councils of governance in terms of, because I'd imagine they have a closer relationship with the individual towns, the 284. So the councils of governance, the COGs as they're more popularly known, what role will they play in this broad implementation of the plan?
COGS, our Council of Government system here in Northeastern Illinois is unique in a lot of ways. And I think that's a strength of the region. Bringing sub-regional groups together to talk about issues makes a lot of sense. South Suburban Cook has many of the same issues as McHenry County, but not all of them. And so how do we bring people together to talk about them? When we got here, when we created CMAP, we put extra money into that COG system to strengthen it, to make it so that it wasn't just dealing with transportation, but dealing with all of the issues that we face. Okay. And we need to continue to do that. We see the COGs as a real partner in moving this plan ahead, and also in delivering the message of why this is important and helping communities understand where they fit.
So village leadership is elected every 4 years in most towns.
Right.
There's a degree of uncertainty in terms of the sustainability, and a lot of times the village presidents and mayors, they are there for a number of years. But considering going forward to 2040, as we try to get this plan implemented within their system systemically, how do you see that happening? I mean, what role will CMAP help in terms of getting more of the systemic implementation within 284 towns?
Yeah, and that's a tough question when we have elections every 4 years and mayors have to think about being reelected in the towns that they serve. It's an important issue that we've got to resolve. Part of it is education. How we educate our elected officials, and that's not just mayors. We need to do a better job with town councils and village boards. Okay. We need to get in with planning commissioners, and we do planning commissioner training across this region. Okay. We're going to kick it off again now in the spring. We cycle every council of government through about every 2 years with all their planning commissioners, because those people make real decisions on Monday nights, and how we make sure that they understand what happens when they make those decisions and how it all fits is important. So we're trying to build that knowledge base from the planning commissioner to the town council to the mayor overall, so that when a mayor decides he's not going to stay anymore, he's going to retire, or he doesn't get reelected, we don't lose that momentum. Okay. People are already thinking about it. The same is true in staff. We have a lot of communities that don't have the kind of staff resources that are necessary in some cases. So how do we provide some momentum, some training for staff so that they're thinking about what the decisions are and how they affect their community, but also showing them what's happening elsewhere. Okay. I think that's an important lesson for all of us to learn. We like to say that we're tired of hearing what's going on in Portland. There's a lot of things that just aren't going to happen in metropolitan Chicago that are happening in Portland. But the truth is there are really good things happening in our communities here, and we need to showcase them. Good. And we need to show all of our communities that you can do this too. It can be done here, and it can be done, and help you make your community strong.
So, I mean, CMAP is really in a position to play a very critical role, obviously, in terms of developing this region from coordination, education, and sustainability in terms of knowledge. Right. And so that's what I hear you saying, is that you all are going to find a way of educating people within the 284 communities on the processes of planning and why it's important, not only in terms of what they're doing locally, but connecting it to the overall, to their neighbors, and then connecting the neighbors to the overall region.
Exactly.
So now that the plan is done, I mean, it's out, and it's a living and breathing thing now. It's moving. How will you gauge the region's progress in making Go to 2040 a reality? What are some of the things that you're going to use, that the organization is going to use? One of the things that we were very fortunate to have early on in this process was a partnership with the Chicago Community Trust. And together we created something called the Indicators Project, which led to a website called Metropulse.
And really what that is able to do is to track our progress on a whole bunch of different performance measures on whether we're getting to where we want to go.
Good.
You know, a lot of times regional plans get done and they look nice and people actually want to implement them, but they don't know if they are. This really gives us the opportunity to say, are we making as much progress as we thought? As you know, there are interim goals, there are 5-year goals of all the policies in the plan. Are we making progress? If not, why not? Was the strategy wrong? Was the goal wrong? How do we make that adjustment? The other nice thing about MetroPulse is that it has hundreds of different data issues that is set up so that the average citizen can look and see how does this issue affect me. I'm not the most technology savvy guy myself, and I told the staff that if you cut this up so that I can use it, then anybody will be able to use it.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
And they can, and it's really easy to use and has just incredible information about where we are in comparison to time, but also where we are in comparison to our competitors. And I think that's the key to driving whether or not we're being successful, is to continually monitor our progress.
So the MetroPulse is an online web-based application that that folks will be able to see the kickoff and the progress compared to the indicators. So how do you envision the region looking by 2020, 2030, 2040? What's your, we have a few minutes left. I'm curious to know, what do you see the region looking like?
I see
in those 10-year chunks.
I see slow progress. We tell people all the time that this isn't a plan for 2015. It's a long-range plan, and it does take time. But we are where we are because of the decisions we made 20 and 30 years ago. So let's make the right decisions now for 20 and 30 years from now. What I see in the future is I see this housing crash having people rethink about what they want their community to look like, thinking about what kind of housing they need, what kind of development they need. We talk about more compact development, and that doesn't mean high rises in every community. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean the kind of densities that we have even in downtowns in suburban Cook. It means what makes sense in your community. How does it fit? How do we make downtowns come alive again? And that's really, I think, the number one issue for me is how do we make downtowns live? So that it's not just a place where I get off the train, I maybe pick up my dry cleaning and I go home, or stop at the bank and go home. It's a place where I gather. It's a place where I stay. It's a place where I meet my neighbors. We talk about new downtowns that look a little bit like old downtowns. Where they're a gathering place, a place where people live, a place where people play, and how do we do that? And I think that's the number one goal. If we bring those, and every community has a downtown, whether you're big or small, you have an area that you want your residents to gather. And so I think that's where we start, is building those, strengthening those, making those work again.
So you're saying that if we start seeing downtowns pop up in these 284 communities across our region, that's would be a nice indicator that people could start looking at as it relates to the progress towards this plan.
I think so. I think it would mean that we're on the same page and we're moving that needle to really make a difference.
Good. And believe it or not, we're out of time. I can't believe it. We have 1 minute left. But for the viewing audience watching this, what would you like for them to do as a next step in terms of, the plan? What would you like for them to do after they watch this show?
Yeah, I think that the watching of this show is the important first step, getting them introduced. But I want them to care. At the end of the day, like I said, they have to own this plan. Our residents have to own the issues that are in it. I'm not asking everybody to look for every part of the plan, but if you're interested in housing, look at the housing chapter. If you're interested in transportation or logistics and what's happening with freight, look there. If you want to know more about parks and open space, look at that part of the plan. It might drive you to other parts and see how they work together. But I think familiarizing themselves and then asking their elected officials, why aren't we doing this? This makes sense to me. Why aren't we moving forward?
Good. Excellent. Well, Randy, I knew that we were going to run out of time. I get most of the questions in, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing with my viewing audience the importance of the 2040 plan. I do believe that it's important. I think it creates a well-needed alignment for the region, and I think that's going to do some good for some public good for this entire region. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in. This concludes the aspect of interviewing all the executives of the CMAP organization. And the next step now is going to be talking to the executives and the COGs, as well as now talking to the village presidents and mayors to talk about the